Hi guys. It's Tales After Dark here, and it would mean the world if you could subscribe for more awesome scary stories before bed. Also, if you're going to fall asleep to this video, I would recommend turning autoplay off. Thanks, enjoy. This story is a collection of posts from a real Reddit user. Post 1. My baby wakes up in the middle of the night, hysterically laughing, on a regular basis. The first few times this happened, my husband and I thought it was the cutest thing, but it happens so frequently, we're becoming concerned. As much as I hate to say it, it's also a little bit creepy. I was fully prepared to wake up to my baby crying in the middle of the night, but Colson almost exclusively laughs. I've asked my parents and friends about this, but they just say what a delightful baby I must have. It just doesn't seem normal. Does anyone else have a child that does this or did this? Should I be concerned? Post 2. My last post received many responses. Some people said my house was haunted and, to be honest, I had that suspicion. Even before it was a nursery, our dog, Champ, has avoided that room. This always struck me as odd because he follows me everywhere. The logical explanation came from a few parents warning me about gelastic seizures. I don't truly believe in ghosts, so I made an appointment with the pediatrician. Initially, the doctor said it's common for infants to laugh in their sleep and it was just a normal part of development. I had to explain that Colson awakens in fits of laughter and always stares at the nursery closet. This piqued the pediatrician's curiosity, and she agreed to run an EEG. Luckily, it showed normal brain wave activity. This gave me comfort, but we were advised to monitor him for any other signs of seizures. I just want to thank the parents that told me to get him checked, as it's given me some peace of mind. Maybe my friends and family were right, and Colson is just a happy baby. Post 3. It's been a little while since I've posted about Colson. He hasn't shown any signs of epilepsy, and I'm so thankful for that. However, something weird has been happening. Colson is now 2 years old. Our living room has been fully taken over by toys. My husband, Jax, is an amazing father, and he spends hours playing with our son. Their playtime always seems to end the same way. They will be fully engaged in play, and then Colson will stop near the stairs and stare up at his room. Then come the fits of laughter, and sometimes he even waves. This has been happening for months now, and we can't explain it. It just happened again today. Since Colson is starting to talk, my husband finally asked him, "What are you looking at, buddy?" He responded, "The man. The tall man in my room." I overheard this, came out of my office, and shot Jax a look. He immediately went upstairs to check it out, but obviously no one was in our house. I'm officially freaked out and starting to think our house might be haunted. Jax just shrugged it off. Parents, am I overreacting? Post 4. Again, I received a lot of responses to my last post saying the house haunted. There were also a lot of responses saying it's perfectly normal for children to have an imaginary friend, especially for an only child. I feel a little silly that I'm getting all worked up about it, but this is my first time being a mom. I'm scared of things that I never imagined being afraid of, like electrical outlets, moderately high surfaces, cleaning supplies, and now imaginary friends. Parents also told me not to show any fear with regards to the imaginary friend. He could use that to get a rise out of me or manipulate me. I'll be damned if I let my 2-year-old son manipulate me. I'm doing my best, but this child pulls my heart in a million directions. Just wanted to thank all the parents that put my irrational thoughts at ease. Post 5. Update on the last post. I think I did well today not revealing my true feelings about my son's imaginary friend. That doesn't mean I'm not feeling strongly about what happened. When Jax was at work, Coulson was playing in the living room while I was in the kitchen. Things seemed to be a little too quiet. I went to check on him. He had his stuffed animals arranged in a circle as he sat in the center in a meditative state. I asked him, "What are you doing, sweetie?" but he didn't reply. I walked over, touched his shoulder, and asked again, "Sweetie, what are you doing?" He looked up at me and said, "Mr. Ring told me to do it." Calmly and with a smile on my face, I asked, "Who is Mr. Ring?" Very nonchalantly, he replied, "The man who lives in my room." Okay, so the imaginary friend has a name. Maintaining my composure, I asked, "Yeah, but what are you doing?" He scoffed at me and said, "You wouldn't get it, Cassie." I was not amused with his attitude, and it almost broke my heart when he called me by my first name. I told him, "Please, sweetie, call me Mommy." To that he replied, "You shouldn't have broken the circle, Mommy." I said, "Okay," and had to walk away to maintain face. This little dialogue really freaked me out. I have to ask, does anyone have a 3-year-old that calls them by their first name? Why does my 3-year-old know how to be condescending? What do you think he meant by breaking the circle? Like, is this a game some other children are playing? Post 6. As always, I got a lot of people saying my house is haunted, and my son is interacting with a spirit. Quite frankly, I'm starting to believe this more and more. I do appreciate some of the rational responses I received. To the people who said I am justified in being freaked out, but I don't need to be, thank you. Some parents said children might address a parent by their first name because they hear others doing it. That makes sense to me and is probably the case. Other people said kids sometimes mimic sarcastic or condescending tones if they hear the parent speaking that way. This also makes sense but isn't the case here. Jax and I always speak very kindly to each other, especially in front of Coulson. I know he didn't learn that from us, but I guess he could have picked it up elsewhere. Anyways, I'm feeling a little bit better about things now. I'm not ruling out the possibility of the paranormal anymore. Something just feels off. Am I a bad mom because my son creeps me out now? Post 7. This is a follow-up to my last post from a few months ago. Since then, Coulson has regularly talked about and played with his imaginary friend Mr. Ring. A few weeks ago, we were getting ready to go to the park. Coulson asked me if Mr. Ring could come. I said sure, but then he asked me to fill a bucket of water. He said it's the only way Mr. Ring can leave the house. Truthfully, I didn't feel like lugging a bucket of water around the park, and I said no. My son proceeded to throw a tantrum. I caved, filled a small bucket of water, and gave it to him. Coulson stuck his hand into the water, said some gibberish, and returned to his happy state of being. Here's the problem. Now he wants to take Mr. Ring everywhere we go, just a bucket of water. Parents, should I be entertaining this? How long do kids normally have imaginary friends for? I really don't want to be stuck carrying a bucket of water around for months or years. Post 8. There has been a development with Coulson and Mr. Ring. I don't think the rational parents will be able to justify this one. I'm fully convinced he is communicating with a ghost. A lot of the paranormal parents responded with concern to my last post. They asked what exactly Coulson said when he put his hand in the bucket of water. Honestly, I couldn't tell you, and it doesn't matter at this point. He continues to interact with Mr. Ring. He's more interested in his imaginary friend than he is in playing with other children. It is more than concerning to us as parents. When Jax got home from work today, he asked me to come outside. This was unusual, but he had a serious look on his face. He told me he had something to show me and to not freak out. Once outside, Jax handed me a printout of an obituary for a man named Edward Ring. He died 7 years ago at the age of 72. No details were provided about his death. My husband then looked at me and said, he was the previous owner of this house. We are both convinced this is the imaginary friend our son has been interacting with all along. Neither of us knows what to do or where to go from here. For the people who have been saying our house is haunted, what should we do? It doesn't seem like Mr. Ring is a particularly bad spirit. Still, we are both a bit freaked out by this revelation. Post 9. It seems like a lot of people are invested in our lives at this point. I'll try to post more often. Half of you think I'm making this up or have lost my mind. I can assure you that I'm not making this up. I don't think I'm going crazy, but this entire situation has been a lot to deal with. For the people who do believe, these posts will be more directed at you, for your help and support. By far, the most prominent suggestion we've received is to move. Jax and I discussed this at length. It would be too big of a financial hit. Plus, Mr. Ring doesn't seem to be an angry or malicious spirit. Coulson really seems to enjoy his presence. However, it's a little scary to us. Why has he taken such an interest in my son? I just want my baby to have a normal life. The questions I have for the community are as follows. Is there such a thing as a friendly ghost? Should we be entertaining this spirit, or should we be trying to rid it from our house? Will my son outgrow and stop interacting with Mr. Ring on his own? Today, Coulson asked if Mr. Ring could join us for dinner. I wanted to say, fuck no. But I told him, sure. What do you even feed a ghost? Post 10. I can't fully describe how I'm feeling right now. Actually, I can. I am horrified. While preparing dinner earlier, the knife slipped and Jax cut his finger badly. Coulson was in the kitchen, heard him curse, and asked what happened. Jax told him it was nothing, and he just cut his finger. Coulson's eyes lit up and he said, "Follow me, Daddy." We had just taught him how to apply band-aids a few weeks ago. Thinking he wanted to put a band-aid on Daddy's boo-boo, we followed him. Instead of turning into the bathroom where we keep medical supplies, he led us into his room. He then started removing things from his closet. Under the pile of toys was only what I could describe as some kind of makeshift altar. Coulson then removed the centerpiece, a small decorative plate, held it out to my husband, and said, "Put your blood here." The most disgusting part is that the plate already had soiled items and blood smeared on it. There were the band-aids from when he skinned his knee and used tampons he must have retrieved from the garbage. Shocked, my husband asked, "Buddy, what is that?" This child replied, "It's a blood plate. See? I already have my blood and Mommy's blood. I just need yours. Touch the plate, Daddy." Jack snatched his hand up and asked what it was for, to which Coulson shrugged and said, "It's to help Mr. Ring." I cut in, "Sweetie, we do not keep bloody things in our closet. Do you understand?" I took the plate away from him. It was as if I took away his most prized possession. No, it was like I took fresh meat away from a starving animal. He screamed, thrashed, and clawed at me to get it back. I took the plate downstairs, disposed of the bloody products, rinsed the dried blood away, and then threw away the plate itself. Once I did this, Coulson became sullen and retired to his room, closing the door on us. We are at a loss at what to do next. I want to get the house cleansed. Jax thinks it's best we have a priest come out. Does anyone have any advice on how we should proceed, or know anyone that can come to the house to cleanse it? Post 11. To the people saying sometimes children do weird things with bodily fluids all the time and it's not that strange. Fuck off. To the others saying we should get our child professional help. I don't think talking to a shrink is applicable for our situation. Coulson has been wary around us for the past week. He's seemed less happy and more secretive about his interactions with Mr. Ring. One day, while he was out with Jax, I had someone come to the house that claims to be a psychic medium. Right away, claimed she senses a malicious presence and began to go about the house, lighting different herbs and smoking items, and finally cleanses the house with sage. When she got to Coulson's room, she stopped and refused to enter. She said the energy in that room was not something that could be dealt with. She immediately left and wouldn't accept payment. I asked her what we could do, but her only response was, "Get your family out of this house." We have a priest from the local church coming out next week. It doesn't seem like he believes there is a malevolent spirit plaguing us, but he did agree to bless the house. I'll keep everyone updated, but I don't know what we are going to do if he can't help. Post 12. The priest hasn't been out to the house yet. It's getting close to Christmas, so Jax went up to the attic to get our decorations. The attic can only be accessed through a small opening in Coulson's closet. After about 30 minutes of pulling decorations, Jax called me into the room. On the floor sat all the familiar items we had collected over the years, along with a wooden chest that I didn't recognize. My husband said it was in the corner of the attic and must have been missed during the cleanout. What was most disturbing were the contents inside the chest. There were stacks of old leather-bound books, pages worn and yellowed from the passage of time, depicting rituals written in a language that I suspect to be German. The chest also contained candles, runes, amulets, and talismans. Wrapped in old newspapers were glass jars with preserved animal fetuses and vials of blood. It's quite clear that the man who lived in this house before us was into something dark. What's less clear is what we should do with these materials. I told Jax not to fuck with it, to put the chest back where he found it. My husband wants to take the chest along with its contents out back and burn it. Can someone who is familiar with occult practices please advise us on the best course of action? On one hand, I don't want to do anything that would anger the spirit that resides in our house. On the other hand, maybe if we destroy these items with fire, he, or it, will go away. I see conflicting information online. Maybe the priest can provide us with guidance. Post 13. The priest's visit was a bit anticlimactic. Father Finnegan came to the house today and, as predicted, didn't take our concerns seriously. Moving from room to room, he said different prayers and sprinkled holy water. Coulson was blessed directly, even having holy water sprinkled on him, to which he had no reaction. At this point, I was expecting a scene from The Exorcist, but Coulson just politely smiled at the priest during the blessing. It was really cute, and I was reminded of what a sweet boy we have when he isn't interacting with Mr. Ring. Jax and I received a lecture about the difficulties of being first-time parents and how being a part of a community has many benefits. To be honest, I was kind of sold on attending Mass more often. Not because I believe everything the Bible says, but the community aspect of it seems nice. The only thing I didn't like was how dismissive he was about our concerns with Coulson's behavior and the items we found in the attic. He brushed it off and simply stated the church would help our son and to just get rid of the unwanted items. The latter part of that advice was very contrary to the responses I received on here. Everyone is agreeing not to burn the wooden chest. Some are giving me very specific instructions on how to dispose of the materials. Others are saying leave them as they are and get out of the house. Again, I'm receiving lots of conflicting information. I'm inclined to leave the chest as it is and keep it tucked away forever in the corner of my attic. Post 14. Yesterday, while I was out with our son, Jax took the wooden chest out back and burned it against my wishes. Coulson was not in his bedroom when we discovered it and, for all I know, he has never seen it before. Still, when we arrived home, something about his demeanor changed. It was as if he received information from Mr. Ring that something was very wrong. Now, he hasn't spoken a single word to us. Nothing we do is getting him to break this little grudge he has. I was a bit upset with my husband that he would do that behind my back, but, at the same time, a little part of me wanted to burn that chest too. I just wish it didn't have an impact on our son the way it has. Post 15. It's been nearly 2 years since I've posted. People have reached out asking for updates about my family. Only recently have I felt ready to share the events that occurred following my last post. Coulson remained in his room, refusing to acknowledge us or eat for nearly 2 days. We had plans to have him see a therapist the following day. That night woke to movement and the sound of muffled choking coming from my husband's side of the bed. What I saw destroyed my reality and broke me as a person. Through the dim light that trickled in from the hallway, I saw Coulson had buried a kitchen knife into Jax's throat. When he noticed I was awake, he quickly withdrew the blade, and blood spewed out of my husband's throat. Then, Coulson came for me. I rolled out of the bed and crawled backwards toward the hall, pulling the door shut behind me. Sitting on the floor, I held the door shut. Coulson slammed into the door and pulled at the handle like a little monster. He pleaded with me, "Please, Mommy, come back to bed." My scream shook through the house. Sitting there, I screamed for help, screamed for it to stop, screamed for it to not be real. For a moment, I thought I might be having a night terror, then I felt it. From under the door my son was sliding the knife blade into my thigh. It was all too real at that point, and I made a break for it. Even with a stab wound to my thigh, I wasn't going to be murdered by a 6-year-old. I made it out of the house with my car keys before he even got down the first flight of stairs. I drove to my sister's and called the police. They swiftly reported to the home, and upon entering, found Coulson drawing runes on the walls with Jax's blood. Coulson is now in what they call an intensive therapeutic boarding school. He was too young and disturbed to be placed in the juvenile justice system or foster care. I've spent the past 2 years living with my sister, involved in intensive therapy, and attending Mass. I can't acknowledge my true belief that my son was driven to this by a spirit that resided in my house. They allowed this talk for some time after the incident, but they threatened to 302 me now. I'm told I need to come to terms with the reality of the situation. The only thing I question is the quality of the care I provided. Did this happen because I was a bad mom? Should I have gotten him help sooner? One thing I know now that others knew from the start. We should have moved. Story 2: The Body. There was a body under my bed and no one believed me. I was 12 when it happened. While taking inventory of my marble collection, my tigers, I rolled underneath my bed. Without a second thought, I reached under and felt around. That's when my hand touched hers. At 12, the only hands I had ever held were those of my parents when I was little. Right away I knew what it was when those cold appendages met mine. I recoiled my hand and backed into the adjacent corner of my room. Once I calmed down, I got on all fours and lowered my face to the floor. The last thing I remembered were those eyes. The most intense blue eyes I had ever seen, even to this day. The next thing I knew, I was waking to the concerned faces of my parents standing over me. My sister, Jill, relayed that I released a blood-curdling scream and passed out right after. Not long after I came to, the memory of what triggered the episode came flooding back. I proclaimed that there was a body under my bed. And of course, like the majority would, my parents thought I was full of shit. They said it was just a bad dream. It's just your imagination. But I was adamant and persistent. They had no choice but to investigate. I sat and waited, huddled on the couch. I covered my ears and closed my eyes to prepare for the scream that I knew would come from my mother. When it didn't come, I held my breath and cracked my lids just enough to see my parents standing before me again. Their expressions were less that of concern and more of annoyance. They scolded me for playing such a silly prank, and that was that. My parents were of the no-nonsense variety, especially my dad. Their irritation with the situation made me question if I truly saw what I thought I saw. For the rest of that evening into the night, I avoided my room. Once bedtime came, I wanted to protest, but the look my father gave me spoke louder than words. With shaky legs and shallow breaths, I stepped into my room. Everything looked normal. Felt normal. It even smelled normal. Relief and a healthy dose of exhaustion from the day's events washed over me. I hurriedly changed into my PJs and got snuggled into bed. Sleep came to me easier than expected, however, it was not a restful sleep. The nightmares kept me tossing and turning all night. Those damn blue eyes were on the face of everyone I saw. I ran slow-motion dream style through crowds of people grabbing and pulling at my limbs and clothing. They seemed to be pleading with me for something. I jolted awake, unsure of what time it could have been. The sun hadn't risen yet, so I knew it was still early. I felt a sense of unease in the atmosphere. I knew I had to eventually look again. Better sooner rather than later, I thought. I opened the drawer on my bedside table and felt around until the familiar shape of my flashlight grazed my fingertips. I gave it a good smack with my palm before turning it on. After giving myself a mental pep talk, in which I concluded that none of this was real, I crawled off my bed and onto the floor. I didn't scream this time. Or pass out. I just stared in shock and utter disbelief. There she was. The same blue-eyed woman that was the cause of my insomnia that night and for many more nights to come. Her body was bloodied and contorted in such a gruesome way. But it was the look of fear and helplessness in her expression that truly bonded me to my spot. Part of me expected this apparition to rapidly cover the short distance between us and consume me like in the scary movies I wasn't supposed to watch. But she didn't move, blink, or give any indication of life. My stupor finally wore off and I silently crawled back into my bed. I cried myself to sleep asking the universe, why me, and trying to understand how I was going to fix this. Later that morning I awoke, crusty-eyed and groggy, from the crying and lack of sleep. Upon entering the kitchen, I greeted my family and my mother replied with her back to me as she's still cooking breakfast. It wasn't until my father loudly inquired about what the hell happened to my face that I became the focus of attention. My mother made comments about my crusty, puffy eyelids while Jill lovingly compared my appearance to that of fecal matter, which earned a very stern glance from our father. Without thought, I explained that it was the woman under my bed. Before I could go into further detail, my father briskly cut me off. My father was a harsh man who didn't like to be challenged. Once he had closed a case, there were no appeals. He dealt me some choice words and made it clear that this nonsense prank I was pulling was to end and end immediately. I don't believe any other words were spoken that morning in our entire household. Everyone just quietly played their roles and went about our days. But while I knew better than to utter another word on the subject in the presence of my father, school was a different matter. Joey, my best friend and confidant, believed me without hesitation and the brainstorming session was on. "She's gotta be like some sort of ghost," Joey said while rubbing his non-existent beard. I had known Joey since kinder and even at the ripe age of 5, he was a supernatural enthusiast. "But I could feel her hand," I replied. He proceeded to explain how not all apparitions are some haunting, ghostly mist. I still didn't understand, but I was willing to accept any explanation more substantial than hallucinations. We, mostly Joey, concluded that she was a lost soul who was stuck on this plane. Why she chose me to appear to, we didn't know. My biggest issues at the time revolved around Pokemon trading cards and video games. I wasn't equipped to help navigate a ghost towards the light, or whatever it was she needed help with. That would not only require mustering the strength to look again, but also finding some kind of way to communicate with her. Should I call a priest or get a Ouija board? Would my parents even allow that? All those thoughts, questions, and more continued to rattle through my brain for the rest of the day. Upon arriving home from school, the silence of our empty house was deafening. I was usually the first one home as both my parents worked until the evening and my sister had cheerleader practice. My usual after-school routine consisted of having a snack while watching TV for about 30 minutes, then straight to homework. It, as well as my daily chores, were expected to be done by the time my parents arrived home. And believe me, Dad was gonna check. But today, I was on a mission. I would have plenty of time for those later. I walked into my room and stood by my bed with all the confidence I could find. I had to figure out what the ghost wanted. I had to help her. After counting down from 10, I dropped to the ground and peered under my bed. In an instant, all the bravado I had moments before was gone. My ghost was still there in the same contorted position with the same look of shock and sadness, but her skin had started to dull and turn this sickly gray color. In some places it had begun to sag and droop, giving the impression that it was going to literally fall off the bone. But it was taut and stretched in others. More specifically on her face, which gave her a gaunt skeletal appearance. I didn't know much about death at that age, but I had found enough dead animals in the woods to know that this was a look of decay. It wasn't much longer after this realization that its sickly sweet smell hit my nostrils. I dashed to the bathroom, barely clearing the toilet before my lunch re-emerged. By the time my sister got home, I had managed to clean up any remnants of my little episode, but that was about all I had accomplished. She immediately questioned me as to why none of my chores were done. "You know Dad is going to lose his shit," she said. And I knew she was right, but I couldn't even go into my room without gagging. It's like the sight of that decaying specter unlocked the smell, and now it was permeating every inch of my room. After explaining how the situation had worsened, I could see the annoyance all over Jill's face. With an exasperated but gentle tone, she said she was going to prove to me once and for all that this was all in my head. She stood and made a beeline for the closed door. I sprinted in front of her and barricaded the door with my arms spread wide. I begged her to leave it shut. The door was barely keeping the stench at bay. I didn't understand how she couldn't smell it as the odor was still slowly seeping through the small gap at the bottom. My sister hesitated, and at that moment I could see her irritation turn to concern. Without another word, she walked away. My parents arrived together sometime after 6. We technically didn't have a family car, so my dad would use his work truck to drop off and pick my mom up on his way to and fro. Occasionally, he had far-off jobs and Mom would catch rides home from a coworker. Those work trips were a blessing to the rest of us, as it meant we would have a few days without tension and chaos. My dad had only been through the door about 30 seconds before his eyes locked onto mine. I swallowed the knot that had formed in my throat the second I heard the car pull into the yard. I tried to get ahead of his anger by word vomiting what was happening and why I had done no chores. I told him about the decaying skin, the horrendous smell, and those ocean blue eyes. In one swift motion, my father grabbed my arm and dragged me to my bedroom door. His mutterings weren't completely audible, but I was able to make out the phrases, "waste of my time," and "idiotic youngin'." These were probably in his top 5 sayings of his lifetime. With a ferocity that we were unfortunate to see on more than one occasion, he swung my door open, nearly ripping it from the hinges. With one hand still gripping my arm, he used the other to lift my bed, frame and all, against the wall. My dad was a naturally large and strong man. Lifting my bed one-handed was easy on a good day. But when he was in a rage, the man probably could move a house. Amongst the violent disarray of my crying and gagging and my father's yelling, I could still see her through my tear-filled eyes. Still lying there in her death pose. How could he not see her? Smell her. My father pulled me close to his face. He growled through clenched teeth, "If you keep pulling these fucking pranks, there will be a body under this bed, and it will be yours." The house was quiet the rest of the evening, like it always was after one of my father's extreme outbursts. No one spoke a word for 2 days the first time he broke a television set. My father wasn't exactly what you would call a loving paternal figure. We never had that traditional all-American father/son relationship. From an early age, he had accepted that I didn't possess that same innate aggression as him, and declared me a lost cause. And though the smell radiating from under my bed was insufferable, I knew better than anyone just how deep my father's rage could go. The thought of that was a whole lot scarier than that of the dead ghost girl under my bed. I got little to no sleep that night. I spent the first couple of hours or so gagging and fighting back the urge to expel what little food I had in my stomach. Once I had acclimated to the putrid smell, it was the quiet sobbing that kept me from sleep. I would cry and cry until I eventually fell asleep, only to be plagued by nightmares of the face that lay below me. I would wake, soaked in sweat and tears, only to start the whole process over. Unfortunately, this was my new normal. Tossing, turning, gagging, and crying all night, followed by complete exhaustion the next day. The lack of sleep was obvious to my family, but no one dared approach the subject, fearing my father's rage. I would occasionally check in on the state of my corpse apparition bunkmate. She continued to disgustingly wither away right before my eyes. I remember thinking I would start to resemble a corpse, myself, at this rate. And though the sight was gruesome, I had the thought that maybe she would completely decay and dissolve into nothingness. During this time my nightmares became more vivid. I would see her running in the woods. Not jogging, but running in fear. It was like some kind of horror movie. I could feel her fear as she frantically dodged limbs and other forest debris. She would glance back at whoever or whatever she was running from. The look of pure desperation she displayed haunts me more than anything else. The only time I had seen real fear like that before was on TV or in the eyes of my family when my father had one of his more extreme outbursts. It was the fear of knowing something bad was going to happen and that there was absolutely nothing in this world you could do to stop it. As the nights progressed, so did the dreams. Eventually, her pursuer caught up to her. I will spare you the details of her demise. Though it came in the form of a sickening, twisted nightmare, something told me those scenes were too graphic to not be real. And this woman chose to appear to me. She chose to show me these events. But why? What could I do? I started checking the local news websites to see if anyone who looked like her was missing or murdered. But I found nothing. I had started to think that this predicament would end with me withering and perishing away right along with her. Every day I could see the worry in my mother's eyes, but one sharp glance from my father was enough to make the hardest of men shiver. My mother was a small, meek woman who did what her husband told her. At least to his face. Many nights I was supposed to be deprived of dinner, but she would always manage to sneak me a plate in the wee hours of the morning. She saved me many times in more ways than one. After what felt like years, it all ended on one bright, sunny day. I hadn't checked on my specter in a while. By this point, she wasn't much more than a skeleton. The only thing that seemed to resist death's grip was her face. The blue of those eyes never faded. I prepared myself to see that familiar gaze once again, only to find myself looking at a water bottle, a pair of socks, and a baseball mitt. She was gone. I felt a bit of relief, but I felt sadness more than anything. I knew what I had been seeing and experiencing was real. Though I had no proof in those moments, I knew she was real, and I knew what she went through was real. And I hurt for her. No human should go through the atrocities this woman suffered. My family was never religious, but in that moment I prayed that she was at peace. As the day progressed, the immense sadness I felt upon discovering that my specter's departure began to fade. It was replaced with what I can only describe as deep anxiety. I didn't understand why I felt anxious and on edge, especially since it seemed that my ordeal was over. However, shortly after the lunch period, my day, my life, rather, took a turn I never expected. My principal, Mr. Cash, came to retrieve me from my classroom with no disclaimer as to what prompted the trip to his office. I wasn't an angel by any means, but I had managed to never land myself in that hot seat, not even once. During the deafeningly quiet 2-minute walk, I tried to recall anything I could have done to get myself in trouble. It wasn't until he opened the door and I saw the worried face of my sister that I knew the trouble didn't lie with me. Our principal, who was normally a cheerful man, wore an expression that told me no good news was to come from there on out. He informed us that there had been an incident and our aunt was on her way to pick us up. Jill instantly began to weep. I didn't grasp what was happening. Why weren't our parents coming to get us? Were they hurt? Was Mom hurt? Did my dad hurt her? Mr. Cash stood up and began to walk towards his office door. He paused beside me momentarily and placed his hand on my shoulder. Without another word, he left us to wait. In between my sister's low sobs, I could hear my heart pounding. The thumping seemed to grow louder as each agonizing second ticked on. It then transitioned to a ringing in my ears. As the ringing was about to reach a fever pitch, the door swung open, revealing my aunt. My aunt wouldn't tell us much. She confirmed that, while our parents weren't hurt, there was an incident and my mother, my sister, and I would be staying with her for a bit. This statement unleashed a whole new round of questioning. Despite our persistence, our aunt made it clear that my mother had all the answers. Upon arriving at our aunt's house, we found our mother sitting blank-faced and stoic on the couch. You could tell from the puffiness and redness of her eyes that she had been weeping. She immediately outstretched her arms and we melted into them. I still didn't know what terrible thing had happened, but I knew I was happy to be in my mother's arms. After our meaningful embrace, my sister and I each took a seat on either side of our mother as she firmly grasped our hands. She solemnly looked from me to my sister before she began. "Your father did a very, very bad thing, and he won't be coming home anytime soon, if ever," she said as her voice began to crack. She proceeded to reveal to us that our father had murdered a woman a state over while he was on one of his supposed work trips. Mother didn't go into much detail to try to spare us some trauma. To prevent us from stumbling upon the gruesome facts of it all, we weren't allowed to watch cable or access the internet. We were told we would be taking the rest of the week off of school, maybe longer. This would normally be a 12-year-old's dream, but this felt more like a hellscape. That night, after everyone else had made peace with the Sandman, I crept into the living room and tuned into the local news station. It wasn't long before I saw her. Plastered on the screen, dressed in her jet black cap and gown, was my ghost girl, Anna Elizabeth Collins. She was 19, not much older than my sister. Anna had fallen in with the wrong crowd shortly after graduating high school. She often caught rides with strangers as a means of getting around. Her body had been found by some hikers out in the woods. Our father and his work truck fit the description of the man seen giving her a ride. Police followed him for weeks, waiting for him to slip up. They retrieved DNA from a cigarette he had tossed on the ground. It was a match not just for Anna, but for 2 other unsolved missing persons cases. As I stared into those baby blues, I felt tranquility I had never felt before. Though Anna had suffered greatly at the hands of my father, I somehow knew she was at rest now. I turned off the TV and lay on the couch until I drifted off to sleep. That night there was no gagging, tossing and turning, or nightmares. That night I dreamt I was standing in the middle of my room. Anna appeared in my doorway, but not as the mangled corpse I was used to, but how she looked in the photos and videos on the news. Her face was serene and angelic. She glided across the room as the light of her aura filled the entire space around us. She placed a hand on each of my shoulders and gently pulled me into an embrace. I knew that life was going to be very different for my family and me after this, but in that moment I knew we would eventually be okay. Story 3: The Town. You know, the kind of town where everyone knows everyone. Where the local diner serves coffee in mugs stamped with your name, and everyone will lend a hand to a neighbor in need. A place where generations of families grew up together. Well, that is the sort of place where I live. Sure, it is a bit rustic, hell, I barely have reliable internet. But it is nice enough for us. It's the kind of place where time feels like it's standing still, except for one thing. The nights. The nights here are a little different. I've lived here all my life, and there's no place I'd rather be. Or at least, that's what I used to think. This place has its quirks, like any small town, but there's a big one that stands out for us. You see, every night, without fail, at 11:38 p.m., the town locks down. I'm not talking about just closing up shops and less people being out and about. I'm talking about a real lockdown. Doors slam shut and are barred, windows rattle and lock, and everyone knows they have to be inside and stay inside, at least for what happens next. The next part is strange. No one ever sees anything moving out there directly, but we all just know. We just know that somehow, something outside is trying to get in. An eerie silence falls over the streets. It's like the whole town is holding its breath. Then in 12 minutes exactly, it is just over. I've always wondered why it happens at exactly 11:38 p.m. People here don't talk about it much, but when they do, they whisper. They say it's just the way things are, that it's been happening for as long as anyone can remember. But I know better. I've seen it. Whatever it is. The first time I noticed it, I was still pretty young. I think I was 10 or 11. I'd stayed up late reading some of my favorite comic books. My parents warned me, like many other kids in town, that we had to go to bed early, but if we did get up, then absolutely no leaving the house or leaving any windows or doors open. I was not asleep, but was still following the rules when I heard the strangest sound. It was a low, guttural hum that seemed to vibrate through the walls. I looked out the window, and that's when I saw it. The streets were empty, but there was a presence. It's hard to describe. It wasn't a person or an animal. It was something else. Something that didn't feel like it belonged. It moved with this strange, jerky motion, like it wasn't entirely in control of its own body. It radiated a disturbing sense of distortion that made my head hurt and my eyes had a difficult time focusing on it. I could feel this overwhelming sense of hunger that made my skin crawl. Before I knew it, it was over. It had passed my house and I realized I had been staring out my window in a hypnotic daze. It was almost midnight and I went to sleep and did not tell my parents about the disturbing thing I had seen. I didn't see it again for years, but the feeling never left. Every night at 11:38 on the dot, when the town shuts down, I know it is there. We all try to act like it's not. Just behave like we have a strict curfew and that nothing is really out there. Yet the people who are too bold or foolish and think that it's nothing, well, they don't last long. Those of us who are still here know that whatever that thing is, it's out there. Stalking, hunting. Looking for anything, an open window, a cracked door. Disappearances are frequent, especially for such a small town. The police have a whole song and dance for anyone who goes missing from the outside, but when it is a resident, well, it is more of a case where the families of the victims are reprimanded for not having known better. No one knows why the window of time is so mercifully brief. Almost just as suddenly as it starts, it's over. By 11:50 p.m., the streets are quiet again, and the town feels normal. But it's not normal. It never was. People here have learned to live with it. They lock their doors, shut their windows, and pretend it's not happening. I asked my parents why we don't just move and they never gave me a good answer. All they said was, it wouldn't do any good. We have to endure. It has to be here. It is safer for everyone if it's here. It did not make sense. I know people can get attached to places, but it felt crazy to me. I couldn't just pretend this was normal, not after what I saw. Not after what I felt. There was something out there, and it was worse than anyone would believe. It was just recently that I saw it again. It was a normal night, at least as normal as nights could be in my town. I was getting ready to go to bed, when I noticed that my cat Quincy was missing. I looked everywhere but I couldn't find him. Then I heard something and looked through the window to spot a familiar shape and my heart sank. He was outside. He must have gotten out when I had come home earlier and was sauntering along the sidewalk, clueless to the impending danger. The time was 11:36 p.m. I had no idea if the creature did anything to animals, but I did not want to find out. I had never let Quincy outside before, and he did not come back to my shouted calls for his return. I had to do something dangerous and stupid to save him. I rushed outside, sprinting toward him and trying to grab him and bring him in before it was too late. I managed to reach him and pick him up. But then I froze when I sensed a presence as I was scrambling back to my door. Quincy's ears folded back and he hissed. I felt paralyzed, and then I thought I saw it again. It was different this time. Larger and more overwhelming than before. Its presence seemed to fill the entire street, pressing against the houses like an unseen force. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen in place, my breath caught in my throat. To my horror, it seemed to finally regard me. Quincy jumped out of my hands and ran back to my house. He had fortunately evaded whatever interest the thing might have had with him. The creature's head twisted unnaturally in my direction, its distorted features coalescing into more recognizable shapes. Staring into the grotesque visage forced a scream out of me as I beheld the blasphemous impossibility. I turned and sprinted away, screaming like a maniac. My heart hammering against my ribcage with such force that each beat felt like it might crack my chest open. The sound of its pursuit echoed behind me, a wet slapping noise like a monstrous jellyfish gliding across the ground. Its deafening roar filled the air, shaking the ground beneath my feet as I ran for my life. I did not know if I could get away. No one I knew had been outside and survived. I ducked into an alley, my hands shaking as I pressed myself against the wall. My breath came in short, sharp gasps, and I could feel sweat dripping down my face. I didn't dare look around the corner. I didn't dare move. And then I heard the harrowing screams. They sliced through the air, piercing and full of terror. My heart raced as I strained to see who was making them, but all I could make out were shadowy figures caught in the open. The screams were short, sharp, and then they were swallowed by the night. The deafening silence that followed only added to the fear weighing down on me. I stayed pressed against the wall, trying to make myself as small and invisible as possible. The darkness seemed to come alive with every creak and rustle, amplifying my fear. I held my breath until I heard the sound of the creature moving away. And then, just like that, it was gone. But the eerie stillness lingered, haunting me even after the clock struck 11:50 p.m. The streets were once again quiet, but my nerves were still on edge. I stumbled back to my house, every step feeling like a race against time. Quincy waited anxiously at the door and bolted inside with me, seeking shelter inside. The horrible night had left me shaken, but grateful to be alive. Whatever that thing is, it does not belong in this world. It is not of this time or place, and its presence is so unsettling, it makes your mind ache just to catch a glimpse of it. No one can tell of its origins, maybe they are lost in the depths of history. But whatever its history, it remains. Always there, lurking in the shadows every night without fail. At that point I did the one thing you probably think everyone should have done by now. I left my hometown. I moved to the largest city I could reach to get away from it all. My parents did not approve. In fact, they tried to tell me I could not go. I was so desperate to get out of there that I had to sneak away in the early morning when they could not interfere. I never understood why we all stayed there and tried to ignore the eldritch nightmare that hunted us at night. It seemed so simple and I felt better at first. The city felt alive with the hum of traffic and the distant chatter of people during the day, a cacophony that made me feel safe, anonymous. Indeed, I thought I'd left the nightmare behind, that the creature was just a memory, a relic of a past I could bury. My new apartment is a cozy studio on the 5th floor, with a view of the bustling streets below. High enough where looking out the window does not fill me with dread at night. Unfortunately, something happened last night that has shattered the fragile illusion of my peaceful transition. On the first night in my new place, I sat on the edge of my bed, flipping through a magazine to distract myself from the creeping unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. The clock on the nightstand read 11:28 p.m. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the creature was gone, that I was safe now. But the weight of the past lingered, a shadow in the corner of my mind that I couldn't shake. By 11:38 p.m., the city outside my window was eerily quiet. The usual sounds of traffic and distant music had faded, replaced by an unsettling stillness. I tried to focus on the magazine, but my eyes kept drifting toward the window, the darkness beyond the glass pressing in on me. And then, I heard it, a soft, tentative tap against the pane. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, the magazine slipping from my fingers and falling to the floor. The sound was light, almost imperceptible, but it sent a chill coursing through my veins. I told myself it was nothing, I was just being paranoid. But then it came again, another tap, this time more insistent. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My eyes were fixed on the window, the darkness beyond it seeming to pulse with a life of its own. The tapping stopped, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, a faint scratching sound, like claws on glass. My heart sank. I knew that sound, I knew what it meant. Slowly, with my legs trembling beneath me, I rose from the bed and approached the window. My hand reached for the curtain, hesitated, and then, with a deep, shaky breath, I pulled it back. What I saw made me freeze in terror. The creature was perched on the fire escape outside my window, its twisted form silhouetted against the moonlit sky. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its presence seemed to fill the room, pressing in on me with an unspeakable horror. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. The creature's head tilted to the side, its gaze locked on mine, and I felt a wave of dread wash over me. It was here. It had followed me. And then, as if in slow motion, its mouth opened, revealing rows of jagged teeth, and it let out a low, guttural growl. The sound shattered the paralysis that held me in place. I stumbled back, my voice finally breaking free in a raw, terrified scream. The creature's form seemed to blur and shift, its presence filling the room with an unspeakable darkness. And then, everything went black. I regained consciousness, and I know it is not over. There is no escape from this thing that has followed me. I consider what my parents had said when I asked them why we never moved. Then, with dawning horror, I realized the truth of their words. It is safer for everyone if it's here. They did not mean it was safer for us. They meant it was safer for everyone else. They knew the danger, they stayed to keep it there. Now in my ignorance, I have made a huge mistake. Somehow, it knew I left. It has followed me here, to a place where over 1 million people will soon know about its existence, and maybe more if it moves beyond that. I am so sorry for bringing it here, I didn't know. Please, for your own safety, stay inside between 11:38 p.m. and 11:50 p.m. By now, it might not be safe wherever you are as well. Story 4, The Grocery Store. It's crazy what some people will put up with for a little bit of money. Desperate times, I suppose. Well, I am one of those desperate people. Desperation to get my daughter a life-saving medical treatment is what drove me to where I am now. That same desperation has led to daily fear of what might happen next to Danny and I, now that it's over. I had no choice, I needed money right away. I couldn't qualify for a loan, and the damn insurance company said the treatment was not authorized under our policy. My work was barely paying over minimum wage, and I still needed almost $5,000. The only way this would work is if I got another job working graveyards somewhere else, at least until I could save enough to get her the treatment. Danny was all I had left. I already lost her mother a year ago in that car crash. I couldn't lose her too. I looked high and low. I combed the classifieds and drove around desperately searching for a job that could pay what I needed and have an available night shift as well. The prospect seemed hopeless, but I had to find something soon. The town we lived in was small, and the prospect seemed bleak. That was when, in a streak of what felt like luck at the time, I inquired about a job at a small grocery store about a mile away from where we live. It was called Scher's Nighttime Convenience and Grocery. It was an odd little store that was closed during the day and seemed to open at around 8 p.m. and close sometime before morning. The weird hours seemed off, and I didn't know who would want to shop at a store that was only open in the middle of the night when there were 24-hour chains elsewhere. Though it did not really matter, it was a store. I needed a job, and the unique hours in this case would work for the schedule I needed. I decided to try and apply for a job there. I was on my way home after finishing a shift at my day job. My friend Kathy was nice enough to watch Danny while I was working, and had even agreed to do so if I found a graveyard shift somewhere else as well, at least for a month or two if needed. Since I had seen the odd shop and saw the hours, I decided to inquire about a job at the lonesome and odd little store that seemed to only be open at night. I was reluctant at first, since I thought they might have some illicit reasons to only be open at such hours. Despite my misgivings, I realized it was the best hope I had of getting a job with my minimal skill set, and that was a guaranteed graveyard shift. I got out of my car and walked up to the entrance. The place was pretty run down, but seemed to still have signage up and around the front. There were sale signs and clearance items advertised, and the somewhat normal facade of a grocery store made me relax and continue with my intended course. I noticed up close there was a mark under the first part of the store named Scher's. It looked like Japanese kanji or something. I stepped inside, and it seemed deceptively large compared to how small it looked on the outside. There were aisles of various groceries and other household supplies, and even some clothes racks. I had no idea how it was this large in operation. Most of the shoppers seemed fairly normal at first, though there were some people who you could tell preferred to do their shopping at night. I tried not to stare as I received a rather murderous-looking glare from one such individual who I must have let my eyes linger on too long. The staff also looked about the same as any other store's staff would look. Fairly diverse, and no one with an overly cheery or overly sullen mood about them. I did notice there was not a lot of talking near the checkouts. Moving on, I looked near the front, intent on finding a manager's office to inquire at. I felt hopeful when I saw a sign that I thought read, "Help Wanted." I felt a bit confused and less optimistic when I read the full content of the rather strange sign stating, "Help wanted, but not always needed." I was not sure how to take that, so I decided to look for someone to ask. As I approached the back office and went to knock on the door, I was interrupted by a large man with a blue store apron and a name badge indicating he was store manager. Benny. The large man welcomed me with a pleasant though slightly forced, "Hello. Can I help you find something today?" I was distracted by the almost pained expression on his face, like his smile would eventually shatter the muscles in his face if he kept it on for a moment longer. Brushing past the distraction, I remembered why I was there. Yes, I was actually looking to apply for a job here. I stated my earnest intent while gesturing to the help sign near the door. Benny stopped smiling and looked at the sign and then looked as if he was about to say something when he held up a finger and pulled out a radio from his pocket. "Molly, what is the bagger situation today? How are we holding up staff-wise?" There was no immediate response. He smiled again in that disturbing way while he drummed his fingers along his tie as he awaited a response. His face wrinkled and then he stated, "I am sorry, I think we might be full at the moment, but thanks for your interest." He was about to usher me away when his radio barked to life and I heard a static-laden voice on the line. I couldn't hear everything but it sounded strange and I thought I heard something like, "Rob, caught. Problem. And bagger got bagged." I didn't know what to make of the weird bits I heard, but before I could think twice about it, I heard Benny mumble, "Alright, but next time answer faster. It could have been a code black and if you mess around with those customers, it is your ass next." I was still standing there in awkward silence when he wheeled around and his frustrated veneer vanished and he was back to the awful fake smile as he loudly proclaimed, "Congratulations. There is an opening available now, let's get you set up. Can you start tonight?" "Right now, as in tonight?" I asked, thoroughly surprised they would want me to start immediately and without any application or vetting process to speak of. "Yes, right now, don't worry, we can sort out all the legal stuff later, but for tonight we are actually a bit busier than normal and we could use the help. First though, let's talk terms and some mandatory paperwork." I was not sure what he meant, but I figured it might mean a salary negotiation. "Sure, what is the pay and benefits?" I knew it was a little tacky to ask up front, but I needed that money badly and Danny couldn't afford for me to get taken for a ride by someone low-balling my wages. $45 an hour is the pay for baggers, which is what we normally start people as. I almost gasped aloud. That was crazy for a grocery store bag boy. My surprise was apparent and Benny held up a hand and cut off my next question stating, "We value hard work and integrity here and just a wee bit of discretion." He laughed aloud and slapped his knee. "But in all seriousness, there is a non-disclosure agreement we do need you to sign with the paperwork." He grinned again and I thought the discretion bit and NDA was weird, but that was double what I was making at my day job, so I was overjoyed at the prospect. He continued, "Health coverage and dental are fully covered, but no life insurance. Those policies always have some trouble for some reason." His grin widened as he said the last part and it looked even more fake than before. Despite some disturbing implications, I could scarcely hear the alarm bells in my head over my future payday. I had found a miracle. I would be able to get enough money in about a month working here in my day job. I would be able to get Danny that treatment. I didn't need to be asked twice. I readily agreed to the offer. "Very good decision. Welcome to the Sure family. Ed." Get out here and get our new hire an apron and a tag and start with the simple version of the bagger training. An unpleasant-looking older man emerged from the back room and was holding an apron and moving with an odd gait that might have indicated some previous injury or the like. I forced a smile and introduced myself, but the man, Ed as I heard his name did not reciprocate. He looked me up and down and snorted derisively in a way that was hard not to take offense to. I let it go and waited for him to say something. Just before opening my mouth to ask when the training started, he cut me off and humorlessly asked, "You know bag gin, fella?" Bag gin? Like bagging groceries? I tried to clarify. He glared at me and just nodded his head. Well, yeah, I mean I have a general idea. I never worked at a grocery store before. But I think I know how things should be bagged, generally speaking. He paused an uncomfortably long time and I was about to try and speak again when he snorted and gave a rather unpleasant throaty laugh that ended in a dry coughing fit. After he finished, he said, "Not like this, I'm guessing you don't. Alright then, come on, I will show you how we do the bag gin and also the other rules. Reckon you better listen close, I ain't for repeating myself." I nodded my head and we started towards the back room when I heard the radio on his belt come to life and a very nervous sounding voice on the other line say, "Code black, repeat code black." Ed's face wrinkled in a way that somehow made him look even more annoyed than usual. God damn it all, more of them fellers already. He turned and left, angrily shouting some imperceptible grunts and complaints into the walkie and left me near the backroom dumbstruck and not sure of what to do next. What was a code black? Why was everyone afraid of them? I was about to go look for someone, when I felt a hand on my shoulder and I wheeled around to see a woman. The tag on her shirt read, "Assistant Manager, Molly." She smiled at me and it did seem more genuine than some of the others here. "I'm sorry we have not met. You must be the new hire. I'm Molly, the AM here. I can help you with training and orientation. You can be a great asset here at Schur's." She held a hand toward the backroom doors and ushered me toward them. We moved into the backroom halls and as I looked around, I saw several doors that looked like ice boxes. I figured they must store a lot of products to need that many freezers scattered about. Visible near the freezers' doors were shelves of other inventory. There were rows of boxes and pallets of strange things like chemicals, metalworking gear, various pieces of hardware and crates that had gun manufacturers' names on them. I was wondering again just what kind of store this really was. Besides the odd inventory, it was also kind of a mess and I was glad I wouldn't be the one having to sort all of it. We made our way to an office room with oppressively bright blue painted walls, like a kindergarten classroom. The sight reminded me of when Danny was in kindergarten and I steeled my resolve against any difficulty this job might have. I needed to do this for her. The office was sparse. There was only a desk, some chairs, and a file cabinet. I did notice on the walls, painted on the bright blue, were some black characters that almost looked like calligraphy. More of those kanji were on the wall and again I wondered what they meant. Before I could guess, Molly was motioning to me. She gestured for me to sit down at one of the only two chairs, in this case the one facing the desk. I sat down and she sat opposite me. She looked over a few pieces of paper she had on a clipboard and then smiled, turned around and started rummaging through a file cabinet. As I was waiting, a sudden shriek was heard outside and I looked to the door and suppressed a gasp. Molly didn't react and kept looking for something. I thought maybe she hadn't heard it, and I was about to say something when she wheeled around with a large binder in hand and dropped it onto the desk with a loud crash. "Before training starts, please fill out this form for your safety and ours." She handed me a piece of paper that, when reading the details, seemed to be the non-disclosure agreement Benny had mentioned. I thought it was odd I had to sign this, but other hiring documents like tax, payroll, and healthcare paperwork were not required before starting. I considered they might be paying people under the table, which I hated to admit I might prefer, since no tax deduction meant I could save money faster. I signed all too quickly without realizing what I was agreeing to keep quiet and what the consequences imposed were if I didn't. Molly took the paper, looked it over and said, "Good, that is settled. Well, let's get started. This is the employee handbook. We only have one, so you are going to be doing some light reading for a bit. Because we need the manpower now though, I will go through it with you quickly, since Ed was indisposed." She grimaced when she said the last word and looked at her watch and then adjusted a dial on her walkie-talkie. She looked back at me and resumed, "As a bagger you are vital in ensuring customers leave satisfied with their product, and you are one of the last people they will see on the way out, except in certain circumstances." She cleared her throat loudly in time to some muffled noise I thought I heard somewhere else in the back room. Basic rules and code of conduct are as follows. You are to bag products to the customer's satisfaction. The first thing you are to ask customers is what type of bags they want. Whatever they say goes as far as how to bag things and with what bags. You are not to ask about or discuss the purchases of the customers, no matter how curious you are or how talkative they might be. No questions, period. Understood? She slammed her fist on the binder and I jumped back startled as she looked at me. I stammered out a quick acknowledgement. "Yeah, I mean yes, understood." "Good," she said and continued with the list. No assistance may be provided to customers for loading or unloading things from their vehicles. If a customer requests help to their vehicle, do not under any circumstances assist or leave the building with them or any customer at any time, regardless of the story they give you as to why they need help. It is our policy and they know this. If requests persist or you are feeling intimidated or threatened, you are to press the yellow button at the end of each checkout by the bagging station. A security personnel will escort the offending customer to aisle 4 for processing and detainment. Wait, detainment? They don't just kick them out. I thought that was weird. She continued with the next rule before I could ask about it. The most important rule. Occasionally there will be a special bag request. You will know it when you hear it. If ordered, press the black button by the end of the checkout and proceed with code black protocol. These guests are normally our highest paying customers and often are here at the pleasure of Mr. Sher himself. They must be attended as quickly as possible. There it was, code black again. What special bag was she talking about? Ignoring the look of concern spreading over my face, she continued, "Cell phones, smartwatches, or quite literally anything that could be used as a recording device are strictly prohibited while on duty. Both for our customers' sake and for our own. Store closes at 4 a.m. exactly. Any customers who remain will be escorted out, only exception being any customers who are involved in a code black. No access is allowed to the basement and inventory backrooms, only managers and stock employees allowed. Simple, right? Any questions?" she asked, while flashing another smile. Well, I did have a few questions about that. She cut me off mid-sentence, talking over me and saying, "Good, I knew you looked like a fast learner. Come on, let's get you out to the check stands and bagging." She grabbed my shoulder surprisingly hard and pulled me out of the office and back into the store proper. I saw a few customers look at me getting pulled along, and I saw some snickers, and I felt a bit embarrassed. I was led to a checkout with a flickering number 3 next to it. The other 2 were busy with customers waiting in line to be helped by a cashier and bagger a few feet away from where I would be standing. We stopped and Molly cleared her throat loudly to get the attention of a young man with dirty blonde hair and a rather unimpressed expression on his face. "Hello, Lee, this is our new bagger. Show him the ropes and try to be easy on him, it's his first day. I know it's busy, but we don't need another Rob situation so soon. Have fun, you too." She walked away without another word to the back room, and I was left there with Lee, as I heard his name was staring at me. I tried to break the ice. "Hi, my name is, save it." He responded abruptly. "I don't want to get attached just in case." I liked Rob, he was my friend, and now it's best not to talk about what happened to him. Just do your job and follow the rules and you should be fine. I didn't know how to respond to the blunt introduction, but I figured he seemed nicer than that Ed guy, so I just walked up to the bagging station and gave him a mock salute and tried to put a smile on my face. It was going to be a long night. The first customer came through and Lee wordlessly scanned their items. I proceeded to grab a few nearby bags when I felt a sharp kick in my leg. Lee was glaring at me like I had just slapped his mother. What? I thought I was supposed to. Then I looked at the customer who was frowning at me and I remembered. "Hello, what type of bag would you like?" The customer, an older woman, sneered at me and finally accepted the question and said flatly, "Paper, please," and did her best to pretend I didn't exist while I was bagging her items. Mostly groceries, produce, meat and dairy. There were a few odd pieces, like a set of kitchen knives and what looked like boxes of some sort of firearm ammunition. I was about to ask about them when I remembered the rules. I tried to ignore it and just carry on. She left wordlessly and more customers piled into our line. As the night went on, I started to see less normal items and more disturbing things. One customer had bought zip ties, large volumes of what looked like medical-grade sedatives and several bags of candy. Another bought an ungodly amount of various weapons, ammunition and several large fruits like watermelon and honeydew. I thought he might be just shooting some fruit for target practice until I saw what appeared to be a Kevlar vest and an uncomfortable amount of alcohol. After a dozen very disturbing customers came through, I finally found someone who seemed a bit friendly. She was a kindly old woman who seemed to enjoy speaking to me and by all accounts was very nice. It was a much-needed reprieve and I actually enjoyed talking with her. Her name was Marge and she was just buying some baking supplies, eggs, butter, flour, spices, all pretty normal things. "You simply must try my raspberry tart, it is divine. I will bring some by next time, or better yet, I think I still have some in my car. Won't you be a doll and help an old woman with her groceries?" I was about to accept when I saw Lee's face go blank and he just shook his head. I looked back at Marge and she had a wide grin on her face, and I looked down at the second half of her groceries yet to be bagged. There were containers of various chemicals including rat poison, bleach and ammonia. I tried to speak but I froze and she asked again. "Come on, dearie, My hip is in bad shape after my fall. It will only be a moment and you can have a treat and a nice tip as well." Her grin shifted in a way that made me very uncomfortable and I struggled to speak, but finally blurted out, "No thank you ma'am, store policy. We are not to escort customers out of the store under any conditions." Her grin vanished and grimace of anger flared up briefly. "Oh well, your loss I suppose. I would have made it spectacular. I thought I might get one of the new ones before you figured it out. Next time Sonny, I might just find where you live and make a house call." She winked at me and pushed her cart away, and I was shocked and horrified at the implications of what had just happened. Lee elbowed me in the side and gestured to the customer who had taken her place, and I was forced to just ignore another uncomfortable encounter that night. After a long shift of bagging goods for an assortment of disturbing individuals, I realized my work was done when a screeching PA system informed everyone in the store that it is now 4 a.m. and we are closing. If you have not purchased your items already, then you must leave. If you are loading goods, a reminder that no employees may leave with you. You must take them and leave. If you do not, they will be confiscated. Any customers lingering in store will be confiscated as well. Geez, they were not joking about the strict closing time. A large group of people I had not seen before moved through the aisles with flashlights and batons. They must have been the store's security team. They seemed overkill and intense, more like paramilitary than grocery store security guards. They were looking for any stragglers apparently. I thought just then of the weird announcement about people left behind being confiscated as well, and it seemed kind of concerning with how serious they were about everyone getting the hell out on time. I was ushered out as well, along with the other staff who left wordlessly. I tried to make a quip to Lee, asking if there was ever overtime, but he just kept his head down and ignored my joke. I did not know what kind of operation this was, but the more I learned about it, the more I felt like I made a mistake in taking the job. I had to keep it for a while longer, at least until I could save enough for Danny's treatment. I worked at Schur's for a few more weeks of uncomfortable conversations and ghoulish and unspeakable items being bagged at the caprice of disturbing and malign customers. I saw 2 code blacks in that time, at least I should say I overheard them. Lee told me not to look and try to avoid the attention of the customers who ordered them. After the first one in my second week of work, I did not see Jay, the other bag boy, again. Lee warned me not to ask about him, and I was getting increasingly terrified of what would happen if I got one as well. What the hell were the code blacks? The only good news I had was that the store paid bi-weekly, and to my surprise it seemed like almost no taxes were taken out of my paycheck. I had almost a full $2,800 from the first 2 weeks of work. A little more, and with a bit of the money I saved up from my other job, I could afford Danny's treatment. I just needed to make it 2 more weeks, and then I could quit and never see the awful place again. I managed to avoid any trouble for my 3rd week, but in my last week I had a disastrous run-in with a customer. It was what started a sequence of events so horrible that the conclusion still threatens my family's safety and terrifies me to this day. It was about 11 p.m. and things were going okay. Some of the managers were poking around, and there was an odd air of concern and anticipation in the air. Lee told me that the owner would be stopping by at some point that night, Mr. Schur himself. I was trying to ask more about the owner when a large bald man came to our checkout. He had horn-rimmed glasses and a large jowly face that was fixed in a leering stare that made me feel very uncomfortable. He tried to chat with me, but I got very bad vibes from the man. I tried to ignore him, but he kept pressing it. "Aw, come on man, lighten up. I see you are new here. What's it like working here? You see any real action? Mr. Response was simply asking, what type of bag would you like, sir? I will show you my bag, if you show me yours, he said, then let out a belly laugh that almost knocked his glasses off as he kept smiling at me with a sick gleam in his eyes. After a moment he finally said, plastic's fine I suppose, just trying to lighten the mood. You look tense, like you could use a break. I ignored him while bagging copious amounts of junk food, a pair of pliers, lube, condoms and various chemicals like bleach and OxyClean. I had become slightly inured to the worst of the colorful characters and the concerning wares they purchased, but this one seemed particularly loathsome. Yeah, you could definitely use a break. Hey, I know, I can give you a little pick-me-up in my car. I am right outside, help me take this stuff out and I'm your huckleberry. I couldn't even formulate a response. I couldn't think over my skin crawling away to another zip code. I resolved to just fall back on the rulebook line and proceeded to inform him that we are not allowed to leave the store with customers for any reason. To my horror and disgust, this one did not let the matter go. Aw, come on, you're just playing hard to get. Seriously, I'm sure I can pay you more than these people. Come on, what do you say? Come on out and we can talk about it. I repeated the rules again while bagging the last of his items. But he would not let it go. Hey, listen to me, you little fuck. You think you are too good for me? You think you are some kind of hot shit? Huh? Well, you are coming outside now. No one ignores me like this. I have a special treat in store for stubborn pricks who don't listen to me. His face was bright red and he was practically spitting the words at me. I panicked at first, but then I remembered the button by the bagging station. I pressed it discreetly while trying to hold my ground, shrinking slightly back to the vile tirade of the deranged individual. I took a step back and he moved forward, looking like he was going to grab me. To my surprise, a large gloved hand fell on his shoulder. I looked behind him and a nearly 7-foot-tall man clad in a weird cross between police riot gear and military-grade armor was holding him back. The customer turned around and started to yell at security, "Do you pricks know who the fuck I am? I know the owner. You will all be sorry you crossed me." I am going to, and a sickening crunch was heard, followed by the man going limp. The guard holstered a now bloodied security baton and bent down over the dazed form of the customer. His eyes were glazed and he likely had a concussion, but he was still conscious and tried to speak when the security guard seized him by the throat and hoisted him back to his feet. The customer tried to whimper out a soft and confused sounding "Wait, wait." Before he was punched so hard in the chest, I thought I heard his ribs break from where I was standing. The helmeted face of the guard turned to me, looked me up and down and asked, what type of bag was he using? I had no idea what that had to do with anything, but I answered, plastic. He was using plastic bags. I heard a chuckle under the mask and helmet of the guard and he said, too bad he didn't pick paper. And the guard dumped out one of the man's bags. As he was trying to rise to his feet, the guard placed the plastic bag around the customer's head and tightened it. To my shock and horror, he proceeded to easily strangle him. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and after a few moments it was over. I was speechless and another guard came over and they took the customer's body on a stretcher to the back room. Benny, the store manager, had appeared out of nowhere and spoke to us. I am sorry you had to see that, but I am glad you are safe. We take threats very seriously here and know you all need to be safe in such dangerous times. That is why we keep this place safe from dangerous people like that. I trust what happened here will also be safe and secure with you, right? After all, we wouldn't want you endangered by anyone like that knowing where you live, right? He smiled at us and left to the back rooms. I understood the veiled threat and realized I would not be able to tell any real authorities or report on this madhouse. Despite that encounter, my night was not done yet and the worst was yet to come. Lee would not speak to me about what we both saw, and we tried to move on with the night and pretend what we saw happen didn't happen. It was getting close to 4 a.m. and we would be able to close soon. I was so close to being done with this place and getting out of there and home to my little girl. I just needed to hang on for a couple more days. There were only a few more customers lining up at the checkouts when something odd happened. A well-dressed man went to checkout number 2 and they shut off their light and said the scanner was not working anymore. It seemed fishy since it had been fine all night, but when the guarded looks and concerned faces flashed before me and then back at the well-dressed man, I realized that they might know something I didn't. My heart sank as I realized he might be one of those special customers. I looked over at Lee and he was visibly sweating and fumbling with the cash register. The man sauntered over to out checkout. He had a small basket with what looked like fine sewing thread, thimbles, and tailoring articles. It also contained a hacksaw, a plaster cast, and several boxes of nails and rivets that seemed to clash with the sewing equipment. By itself I did not think anything of it and I relaxed a bit. Lee was pale and wordlessly scanned the small items he had. After they came down the conveyor, the man turned to me, tipped his hat and introduced himself. "Good evening, my friend. My name is Henry Jaspin. I work for a little antique cloth shop and I am here to get some materials." I relaxed a bit more. This did not seem too strange. I proceeded to ask, "What type of bags would you like today, Mr. Jaspin?" "Well, my good fellow, I should think paper for the small bits you see here." Indeed, I found all the tailoring kit I need to make work anyone would be proud of. But what I really need today are some raw materials. So, the bag I really need will be a body bag tonight, preferably the larger variety. My mind was racing, my heart was pounding. Did he just say he needed a body bag? I was about to ask him to repeat it, when it dawned on me. The rules had said, "A special bag request, you will know it when you hear it." I realized I had just encountered my first code black. I forced my trembling body to move and I pressed the black button under the bagging station. I heard an alert on nearby walkie-talkies. "Code black on number 3. Confirmations were heard all around. There was a burst of motion near the back and I handed Mr. Jaspin his bag of smaller merchandise as Benny approached us. "Good evening, Mr. Jaspin." He managed to choke out the words, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. "Oh, Benny, don't worry, I know what I asked for, and though you are a big fella, I wouldn't dream of picking you, we go too far back. Besides, your skin is terrible. Can you imagine one of our suits on you?" Mr. Jaspin let out a howl of laughter and Benny followed suit with a nervous chuckle of his own. "Your new employee, however, he has a nice strong jaw and broad shoulders. Not as much meat though." He looked me over and I was confused and terrified at the implication of whatever it was he was talking about. As he was eyeing me, Benny spoke up saying, "Of course, you are free to pick as you please, but if I could suggest an option." We just picked up a rather unruly fellow who was just processed a few hours ago, and he is on the larger side. Perhaps he would be a good alternative. Of course, Benny, you and your new hire lead the way. I followed Benny, in between him and Mr. Jaspin, who was behind us. We went into the back and then through key-card locked door that lead into the basement. Benny shot me an apologetic look as we descended into the basement, and I beheld what was down there for the first time. The place was very dark and freezing. I thought it might be another type of meat locker, and I was not too far off. When the light switched on, I had to stifle a gasp of shock and horror. As soon as the room was illuminated, I saw it all. We were surrounded on all sides by rows and rows of body bags. Almost all of them were full, corpses leered out of many of them, all in various states of decomposition. I thought I was going to be sick. It looked like a morgue. I realized that we had been dealing with these products the whole time. I laughed quietly to myself in despair when I realized the options were paper, plastic, and apparently body bags. I thought of the conversation of selecting a person. I also thought of the other people who had handled code blacks and had not been seen again, like Rob. Rob was bagged. I stood there, mouth agape, trembling at the horror of the nightmare room before me. While it all unfolded in stark terror to me, Mr. Jaspin calmly perused through the inventory of corpses. He would scrutinize them, pinching a cheek here and there and giving a tut-tut or moan of disdain. He came across the body Benny had pointed out, and he said, my, he is a big fellow. A lot of material they would love to use. Skin is a little dry in places, a touch of eczema. That is all right though, Benny, old chum. You have a deal, I will tell Mr. Sher. Benny sighed in relief and started to guide me out of that nightmare dungeon. While leaving, I caught a look at Mr. Jaspin's pick, and I held my hand over my mouth to avoid gasping out loud. It was the belligerent customer from earlier. A large dent on his face from when it was smashed in by security. The face had a deathly pallor and his eyes were still leering, even in death. Why in the hell was he down here in a body bag? And why did it sound like he was just purchased? My mind was grasping for rationalizations for how and why this was all happening. Suddenly Mr. Jaspin caught my hand and proceeded to place a card into my palm. As for you, my fine friend, we would love to have a worker like you at our establishment. Sure runs a tight ship here, but we are a bit more free-spirited at the tailor. Take care. And he departed with his horrific purchase. I was ushered upstairs in a daze, and I vaguely heard Benny talking with someone. I snapped back to my senses and saw a new face looking at me. He was an older man, and he had very intense, unblinking eyes that were boring into my soul as I stood there. He spoke to me in a stern but oddly soothing voice. I know you might be unsettled by what you saw, but sure knew and the means to access it are natural parts of life. It is what you saw, it is what we sell. We sell it in all its forms. Why, it is even in our name. I hope you understand and do not consider anything foolish over the next few days. We value your work, but understand that some people lack the fortitude to deal with what our business does. Just don't forget that when you head back home to your house on 4th Avenue. The large cherry tree at the end of the street is blossoming and looks beautiful. You should take your daughter to see while it still blooms. He placed a hand on my shoulder and squeezed while departing. I had no idea what I had just witnessed, but I knew I was in trouble. My mind was a jumble, and besides the imminent threat, I found myself considering something unrelated, a name. I thought about what Mr. Schur had said about Schur new and how we sell it. I looked again at the sign as I was leaving, Schur's nighttime convenience and grocery. I did not think anything of it at first, but I looked closer at the kanji by the first word. Looking up the meaning on my phone, I saw it was indeed the kanji for Schur, sometimes used when counting as the number 4 in Japanese, but more often associated with something else. The dawning horror and simplicity of the name made sense now. Schur more often translates to death. I had worked almost an entire month at Death's nighttime convenience and grocery. I did not go back, I quit. I will find another way to make the rest of the money I need. My family's safety is what is important now, and I know it is not safe for me and Danny here anymore. How could it be? When Mr. Death knows where you live.